Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 21 team selection. I'll be discussing my current plans for this week and also looking ahead to future weeks, upcoming doubles, blanks, the assistant manager chip and much more. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, if you are excited for the content to be back, please do smash that like button. And if you are new around here, please do consider subscribing. If you enjoyed today's video, I really do appreciate it. But before we actually look at my team for Game Week 21, I thought it would be useful to discuss when we are going to start getting some of the important information around the upcoming blanks and doubles in FPL. There's been a lot of chatter recently about blank Game Week 29, which I'll discuss in a second, and future double game weeks. But a lot of people are still asking, like, when are we actually going to get some concrete information around these blanks and doubles? So I thought I would just list some of the key events and key dates to look out for in the upcoming game weeks, and why, as a result, it might be quite useful to think about rolling some of the transfers that you've got coming up, or if you're already at 3, 4, 5 free transfers, why it might be worth still saving them and not getting ultra aggressive in the next few weeks. There are times and places in FPL to get aggressive with your transfers. I do think the next few weeks might be the opposite. Just my opinion, I'll explain why. So, we've obviously got the first double game we're expecting to have this season is the rescheduling of the Liverpool-Everton game that was postponed earlier this season. So there'll be a very small double game week. We're expecting it to be in game week 24 or 25 for Liverpool and Everton. In terms of when we're likely to find that out, it's actually probably not expected to be until game week 23 or the lead up to game week 23. There is a very small chance it's post game week 23, but that's obviously not leaving us a lot of time before the actual game will be rescheduled. So I'm expecting by the Game Week 23 deadline that we will know when that double will take place. It is looking more and more likely that it will be 24 or 25, and even more likely that it will be Game Week 25. So for now, pencil in a possible double for Liverpool in Game Week 25, but we should find that out in a couple of game weeks. Immediately, it's obviously worth saving transfers in case you want to bring in more Liverpool assets, or maybe look, if they're looking good under Moyes, to bring in an Everton asset or two. Then ahead of Game Week 24, we'll obviously have the end of the January transfer window. Maybe some transfers take place that mean that you want to buy or sell certain players in FPL. And also ahead of Game Week 24, the assistant manager chip will become available. Now, a lot of people might choose not to play it in Game Week 24. But of course, once again, you have to either make transfers to free up the money and or use transfers to move your assistant manager around. So immediately, you've got a couple of things coming up in Game Week 23 and ahead of Game Week 24 that might mean that you want to have some free transfers available. But the really key dates, and if you've zoned out slightly, this is when I need you to pay attention, is ahead of Game Week 25, we are going to get so much information around upcoming blanks and doubles. So firstly is blank Game Week 29. So ahead of Game Week 25, we have the second leg of the EFL Cup semi-finals. So we will know with certainty which 4 Premier League teams will be blanking in Game Week 29 ahead of the Game Week 25 deadline. And we'll discuss which teams it's most likely to be in a second. And why I've put / Game Week 33 doubles is the teams that blank in Game Week 29 will almost definitely, not 100%, but almost definitely double in Game Week 33. So, basically, by the 25 deadline, we're going to know about the first blank and the first big double of the season, which is really useful information to have. Also, ahead of the Game Week 25 deadline, we have the FA Cup 4th round fixtures. Why that is important is we might start to find out some teams that are obviously progressing in the FA Cup, but also the teams that are knocked out. Game Week 34 will be a blank game week for those teams that reach the FA Cup semi-finals. So basically, if teams progress, it makes it more likely that they will blank in Game Week 34, and the teams that blank in 34 will double in 36. Now, if at this point you are completely lost, what I'm essentially saying is by the Game Week 25 deadline, we will have 100% confirmation of the Game Week 29 blanks, a very good idea of the Game Week 33 doubles, a better idea of the Game Week 34 blank, and a better idea of the Game Week 36 doubles. So, the way that I'm viewing this, with all of this coming up, the assistant manager becoming available, a probable double for Liverpool in 25 and Everton, and all of this extra information, I want to be going into Game Week 25 with as many free transfers as possible and as much flexibility in my squad. So whilst I think there will be value in using transfers, and if you've got injuries or you've got a player that you'd like, let's say you just really want Anthony Gordon, go out there and get him because he might get so many points in the next 4 or 5 weeks that it doesn't matter if it requires an extra transfer or you have less free transfers available. But for me, I'm viewing this right now as only use a transfer if you really need it. because going into 25, I want to be sat with 4. That's my aim. 5 would be wonderful, but that would involve me having no issues over the coming weeks. In terms of Game Week 29, just because we've obviously had those EFL Cup semi-final first legs, I thought I would just update you on which teams are most likely to blank in Game Week 29. And this is courtesy of Johnny C over on Blue Sky. Please feel free to follow him. That was FPL Spaceman on Twitter. So, because Newcastle obviously won the first leg 2-0 against Arsenal, it is looking very likely that Newcastle will reach the EFL Cup final, and therefore they will blank in Game Week 29. They are obviously playing Crystal Palace in Game Week 29, so there is a good chance that Newcastle and Crystal Palace will both be blanking in Game Week 29. So you can see that the two most likely scenarios involve Newcastle progressing. The other tie, of course, Spurs beat Liverpool 1-0. The bookies still think it is more likely that Liverpool overturn that deficit in the second leg, and therefore Liverpool are the most likely to progress. So as of right now, almost 50% likelihood, the 4 teams that blank in Game Week 29, and therefore likely to double in 33, is Newcastle, Palace, Villa, and Liverpool. If I think about my own team right now, I've got Isak, I've got Munoz, I've got Mateta, I've got Rodgers, I've got Salah, and I've got Trent, and I may well add another Liverpool asset, or look to buy a Gordon or a Hall. So we're looking at like 6, 7, potentially 8 players that are blanking in 29, and as much as it feels very easy to say, well, we'll just free hit if that's the case, Game Week 34 is also going to be quite difficult to deal with, especially if all of the teams that reach the semi-final of the FA Cups are all Premier League teams, then you're going to have a much bigger blank and also potentially a bigger double in 36. So, what this might also mean for me, as well as wanting to save up transfers to deal with this and to prepare for Game Week 29, what I'm also thinking is, do I want to be bringing in any more players from Newcastle and Palace? It might be the excuse that I've needed to potentially ignore Gordon a little bit longer, maybe not look to bring in a Lewis Hall if I need a defender, and probably not go out there and get a third Palace asset. It might also put me off maybe going out there and getting a third Liverpool. Maybe it makes me more likely to want to use slot ahead of the double. So these are all of the things that I need to think about. Obviously, it could be that Arsenal overturn the deficit. Maybe Arsenal beat Newcastle 3-0 in the second leg, and actually it's Arsenal and Chelsea. So this is why we need to wait for the second leg. This is why Game Week 25 is that key date that I'm looking at. We're going to get loads of information in the lead up to that. So hopefully that makes sense. I would advise rolling transfers in the coming weeks wherever possible, as boring as that is. So let's now take a look at my team with the context of what we've just spoken about. So guys, I'm going into Game Week 21 with 1.5 million in the bank and 1 free transfer. So a little bit of flexibility in terms of budget and upgrading if I need to, but not too much flexibility in terms of actually restructuring the team because I only have that 1 free transfer available. And as I said, when we go through the team, there are possible transfers that might be made, and there might be injuries that crop up over the next couple of days, which force my hand. But generally, wherever possible, I am going to try my best to roll transfers in the coming weeks. I know that makes content a little bit more boring, but I don't think you follow me just to make exciting moves for the sake of it. You also want to see me try and play the game to the best of my ability, and I can still advise you on your transfers, and things happen, right? Cunha's suspension, Saka's injury, these random things happen that force our hand, like Trent potentially looking like he might be dropped. I don't think he will, as we'll discuss, but things crop up in FPL all the time. So it's very easy for me to sit here and say, I'm going to roll my transfers until Game Week 25. I'm almost definitely not. In fact, if I was a betting man, which I'm not really, I would bet it's quite likely that I won't be able to roll my transfers very often. So, with all of that being said, let's start with the goalkeepers. At the moment, I've got Sanchez starting, Fabianski on the bench. As always, there's a bit of justification to look to start Fabianski. I do think he'll have the starting spot under Potter. However, I just think I back the better defence. And when I look at the fixtures, I think they're both relatively difficult fixtures. Maybe Bournemouth are a slightly better attack than Fulham. But overall, Chelsea are a much better defence than West Ham, unless I start to see differently in the coming weeks. But for now, Sanchez is starting for me. Do I think Sanchez is one of the top 3 keepers to own in FPL at the moment? Maybe not, but I am perfectly happy having him, at least until Game Week 27, or unless he loses his place in the meantime, or let's say Chelsea absolutely stink it up over the next 3 weeks. Maybe I'll start to look to moving on. But with what I've just said about wanting to roll transfers and wanting to be in a good position around Game Week 25, taking out Sanchez doesn't feel like a priority right now. Not expecting a clean sheet, but I do like the fact that it's at least a home game, although Chelsea have actually been slightly better away from home this season. When we look at the defence, I'm actually really happy with the position it's in, despite the fact that I do have Trent. I know a lot of people are worried. Let's actually start with Trent. So I think my perspective on Trent right now is I don't think anyone really knows whether Bradley is a serious threat or whether in slot's head Trent is obviously first choice. There are a lot of differing opinions going around. My perspective on this a couple of weeks ago is that even when Bradley came back, Trent was very much first choice, and I still expect him to start at least 9 out of every 10 games. For me, in order to change that opinion and to change my perspective around whether I think Trent is first choice, I need to see evidence that Trent isn't first choice. Now, you might point to the fact that he didn't start the Spurs game. He's also played a lot of minutes since coming back from injury. That could have been a little bit of rotation. Yeah, he might have been dropped, or it might have just been to take him out of the limelight a little bit. You know, a lot of people talking about Trent, maybe he just thought, I don't need that on top of everything else in that game. Let me start Bradley. I think Bradley is a wonderful footballer, a great right back, and I do think he will be the future of Liverpool. I can't see him moving, and I think when Trent does eventually move on, which looks very possible, I think Bradley will step into that role very well. But there is a massive gulf in quality in terms of how good they are on the ball and from an attacking perspective. And that shows how good Trent is, because Bradley's no slouch with the ball at his feet. But when Trent came on for Bradley, and then what you saw against Accrington Stanley with that goal, Trent is different gravy. His attacking ability is so important to Liverpool that I think his defensive fragilities aren't as important as some people suggest, because I think he's so good going forward. And whilst I think Bradley is probably a better defensive right back than Trent, I don't think that's enough to get him in ahead of him. So I guess what I am saying is, as of right now, I still think Trent is very much first choice, and I think Bradley is very much second choice. Do I know that for certain? No. Right, Bradley could start against Forest. If Bradley does get the nod against Forest, then we probably do have a problem on our hands, and that's probably something we'll have to deal with. But I think preemptively transferring Trent out on the basis that he might be second choice now, or he might get dropped, or he might get rotated in the Premier League, there's nothing to suggest that that will be the case yet. I've got no evidence to suggest that Trent is a rotation risk in the Premier League. So I've basically just done a long-winded version of, I'm going to wait and see. And again, if we get early, let's say we get a leak that Trent isn't starting against Forest, because Liverpool do play on the Tuesday of the deadline, then maybe I sell him. But I still think, based on what I've just said about wanting more information and wanting to roll wherever possible, I'd probably just start Anthony Robinson, who sat on my bench, and I don't feel very happy about having him on the bench. So I think I have the cover to just wait and see. Even if we get a leak that he doesn't start, I'll probably just bench him, and then I'll assess ahead of the GAMEWEEK22 deadline. Hopefully that makes sense. I would love to know your opinion on this down below. Do you think Trent's suddenly second choice? Do you think he'll be rotated? Do you think he starts every Premier League game? Who knows? But in terms of the fixture against Forest, I actually quite like this for Trent, because as much as Chris Wood is a goal machine, and I own Chris Wood, they're also not the best attack in the league. I think they're like 14th for non-penalty expected goals. It is an okay fixture for a defender. So yeah, got Trent in the team. In terms of Gabriel, he got a 15-pointer against Spurs earlier this season. They're not fantastic in the air, defensively from set pieces. They're still missing Van de Ven and Romero, who are two of their most aerially dominant players. They are the sort of players that you would expect to potentially mark Gabriel. So I look at this and I think, a Gabriel bullet header? Quite possible. I'm recording this after the Manchester United Arsenal game. Another goal for Gabriel. I mean, the man's a machine from any sort of crossing position. So I'm very happy starting Gabriel. I made the mistake of benching Gabriel on 3 occasions this season. He got 15, 7 and 6. I don't bench my premium defenders unless I know they're not starting, because they are premium for a reason. They're playing for good defenses and they're normally very attacking. So yeah, Gabriel, Trent, big thumbs up from me. I'm still very happy to have them. And then my other 2 defenders, like I said, Munoz and Robinson, they rotate fairly well. The only issue we've got is that over the next few, they've both got really decent fixtures and I'd like to start them. Like this week, I'd love to start Robinson, but I just think Munoz gets the nod because Robinson's got more assist threat. Munoz has more goal threat. You've got to favour the goal threat. I think Leicester are a slightly weaker team than West Ham. And in terms of clean sheet potential, I'd put them maybe fairly even. Maybe slightly more in favour of Fulham, you could say, just because they're a slightly better defence. But I think overall, if I'm looking at their points potential this week, I think I just marginally prefer Munoz. Next week, Munoz has West Ham and Robinson's got Leicester. They've literally got the same fixtures, but sort of reversed week by week. So next week, we have another decision to make. Do we say the same thing and back the fixture, or do I just keep Munoz in? This feels like one of those that across the next few weeks, with Munoz and Robinson, I'm probably going to get this benching decision wrong more often than not, but I think you've just got to back what you feel on paper. And for me, I've just got a slightly better feeling about Munoz this week. But yeah, there could be some definite bench pain. Vandenberg's, of course, my 5th defender. For now, he sits there. If I feel like I need to make a transfer at some point to get the squad depth, which I don't right now, I can, of course, look to upgrade him. But at the moment, he's still starting, and Brentford have looked marginally better defensively over recent weeks. So yeah, I'm pretty happy, honestly, with the defensive situation. I don't mind my goalkeepers. Let's move on to the midfield. So, discussing the midfield 5 next. I'm pretty happy with the midfield 5 right now. There are definitely players I'd rather own. Gordon, Mbermo, even Ismail Assar, Eze. These are all players that I'd quite like to get into my team. And maybe I wouldn't have in an ideal world Enzo, as you can see on the bench. But generally, it's not a bad situation right now. I'll start with Salah. Salah's great. You don't need me to sit here and say that. What wonderful insight, Russ. Salah's a fantastic FPL asset. The real discussion around Salah this week is, does he get the armband? And he's got the armband right now because basically I don't want to commit to any other player as things stand. Not because I think that he definitely is. Forest are so good defensively. Last season, let's even ignore this wonderful season they're having. Last season, they were 4th for non-penalty expected goals conceded. I feel like this isn't getting spoken about enough, that they were a top 4 defence last season in terms of giving up chances. But last season, Sells was having a stinker. I think he was the worst keeper in the Premier League for expected goals prevented. This season, Forest are pretty much as good defensively, if not slightly better, and Sells is a man possessed. He's probably been the goalkeeper of the season. The saves that man is making are incredible. Once again, another clean sheet and another really good performance for Sells. So, firstly, Sells is a great asset to own in FPL, but also what I'm saying here is that Forest across now over 1.5 seasons have been a really, really good defence. So this is not a particularly good fixture for Mohamed Salah, but it's Mohamed Salah. And when I look at some of the other players, like Palmer's a really decent captaincy shout, but Bournemouth are 6th for non-penalty expected goals conceded. That's not a great fixture particularly either. And Palmer, in terms of goal threat, hasn't shown as much recently. He's had sort of more creativity and more assist threat. Fernandes has the fixture of the bunch, but it's Fernandes and it's Manchester United. How much do I trust them ahead of someone like Mohamed Salah? We'll discuss Isak when we move on to the attack. Another really good option. But it almost feels like, unless I think there is such a standout. Like, if Palmer had Southampton at home, I wouldn't even second that. I'd, of course, go against Salah. But I'm just not seeing a definite standout. A lot of people will say, and I kind of back this is one of your best chances to go against Salah. Would you be surprised if I said the scoreline was 4-0 to Liverpool or 4-1? You probably would. You're probably not expecting Liverpool to score more than 2, maybe 3 goals here. Forest beat them 1-0 earlier in the season at Anfield. So this isn't this isn't the sort of game where we're probably expecting 3+ returns for Salah, and maybe not even 2+. If I had to guess Salah's range of points, I reckon he gets something, and I reckon it's like 6 to 11 points, probably 6 to 10 points, because you won't get the clean sheet point most likely. So I reckon 6 to 10. I feel like Salah's got a very high floor because he usually returns, but in this week it does feel like a lower ceiling. So, of course, there's the chance to go against him. And maybe you like the fact that there isn't a standout, because if there's not a standout, it means that captaincy will be quite split. So I absolutely think this is a really good opportunity this week that I will really think about taking, but I might bottle it and end up just reverting back to Salah. Please let me know down below in the comments, who are you currently looking to captain? In terms of polls, it looks very likely that Isak will be the most popular captain amongst sort of engaged managers that watch YouTube and are on social media. So maybe that's where you go. But I think there are some, even someone like a Munoz. The points are due for Munoz, but I'm not saying you definitely go out there and do that. But I think there are some really exciting options. Palmer's fine for this week. Palmer's fine for the future. I have been a little bit disappointed in terms of overall goal threat from him recently. When you look at the data, I know he's grabbed a couple of goals in the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks, but it's more sort of assist threat. And Chelsea just aren't purring at the moment, you know? When you just watch a team and you're just like, they're not quite at it. Like, Jackson's not finishing his chances, but also not getting the same quantity of chances that we saw at the start of the season. Enzo's faltered a little bit. Palmer's sort of okay. He's ticking along, but they're not picking up the results. So I think as soon as Chelsea start to pick it up a little bit, Palmer will look like a fantastic asset once again. They've also got 3 out of the next 4 that are at home for Chelsea. So yeah, very happy to have Salah and Palmer, both good captaincy options this week. Bruno Fernandes. Actually just really happy to own him at the moment. Manchester United are starting to look better and better. And overall, in the Man United-Arsenal game, I know Bruno Fernandes got another goal. Arsenal really had so many chances they should have finished in that game. But Manchester United just look more of a team. And this is something that data won't pick up. This is something that league position won't pick up. It's something that results won't pick up. There's more of a desire and a passion to win games. The players are starting to buy into what Amorim's saying. They're running more. They're pressing better. The positions that they are on the pitch is looking better. That back 3 of De Ligt, Maguire and Martinez looks a little bit stronger. I just think Mainu and Ugarte look really solid in midfield. Man United aren't there yet. They are still probably a mid-table side, sadly. But you're just starting to see signs a little bit. And Bruno will always be at the heart of that. And at the moment, because Mainu and Ugarte are playing so well as the pair, and obviously if they get an injury, that's a big issue, but if they continue as the pair of 8s or pair of 6s, whatever you want to call them, Bruno will be playing closer to goal. So at the moment, Bruno feels very nailed on as one of the 10s in Amorim's system. His minutes are always good. He's on penalties. He's getting close to goal. I just like what I see from him. And this week, if I wasn't a Manchester United fan, and I shouldn't let this impact me, I'd be very tempted by captaincy. I can't captain a United player. I just can't bring myself to do it because I just know how inconsistent we can be. And it would ruin my entire game week if Fernandes blanked as a United fan and Man United lost. So I feel like it's enough for me to just own Fernandes, but I really like him this week. Beyond that, Anthony Gordon and Mbeumo are both sensational FPL assets, and I'd like to own both of them. So let's say Manchester United look really poor against Southampton, and maybe they have a poor game against Brighton. It's like, oh, same old Man United, back at it again. I probably won't hesitate to offload him to the likes of Mbeumo and Gordon, but he's at least getting the next 2 home games against Southampton and Brighton, and then we'll reassess, because he is a lot of money. Then I obviously have 2 cheap midfielders in Rodgers and Enzo. Rodgers, I think most people accept, he's a really good asset to have at the moment. Everton have been struggling. Obviously now, under new management, Moyes might just tighten them up. They might look really good going forward. It might be a completely different side, but they're just not a very good team. The players aren't quality enough, I don't think, to go out there and score loads of goals. And if Moyes has been brought in to replace Dyche, you would imagine that he's been told, we need to score more goals and we need to be more attacking. Because if all they're going to say to him is we need to concede less, well, you just keep Sean Dyche at that stage. So you would imagine there's something that has said to him, we need to play slightly more attacking football. We need to get more from the attackers. Maybe this is actually a good time for Rodgers to play Everton. Maybe they're going to go out and try and give them a proper game. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of narrative there. I've got absolutely no idea how this is going to go. There might be a bit of a new manager bounce, but I'm very happy to play Rodgers this week. Next week against Arsenal, as we'll see a bit later, I can very easily bench him. And then he goes into West Ham, Wolves, Ipswich. It's a really nice run of games. And I think, I mean, again, Potter, new manager, he's playing 2 of the next 3 games are against managers that have just come in. But generally, and then even Vitor Pereira, I guess, for Wolves. But I guess what I'm saying is I like the fixtures. I think Rodgers is a good asset. I don't know what more I would want from a cheap player. Like, he ticks along, he gets good minutes, and hopefully Aston Villa can start to find some form. Enzo Fernandez is the big talking point because I think a lot of people will look at that position in my team and say it's probably the weakest. Like, when you see my entire team, all 15, apart from Vandenberg, Enzo probably is the weakest. Would I have Enzo as one of my top 3 cheap midfielders right now? No. I would probably say, like, if I was to list the cheap midfielders, let's do that. That might be a useful exercise. I'm not going to say definitely in a specific order, but my top 4 would be Rodgers, Ahmad, Sarr, and Jacob Murphy. They'd probably be my top 4 cheap midfielders. Then I'd probably have Enzo like in 5th. And that isn't any disrespect to Enzo. He's great, but he's just not a better option than those 4. But then I come back to the question, is it worth the transfer? We have seen so many people recently do like Ahmad to Iwobi, or Ahmad to Sarr, or Enzo to Ahmad, or maybe even like Rodgers to Enzo we saw people do. Like, moving around the cheap midfielders and even like moving to like Iwobi, it's just not really paid off. And these cheap midfielders, they're cheap for a reason. They're inconsistent, but they have a decent ceiling. They could each go out there and get you a couple of returns in a given game. It just doesn't feel like a high upside or clever use of a free transfer right now, moving them around. If I was in a position where I had to start Enzo every week, let's say I had a crap 8th midfielder or 8th attacker, and I had to start Enzo every week, then I would absolutely consider maybe selling him. But I don't have to play him in any week. And in the ones that I do probably want to play him, he actually has some good fixtures. The other good thing about Enzo, he's still taking in swing and set pieces, which is really good because it's another route to points. If he's having a really stinking game, but he whips in a good corner, he might be able to grab an assist. And also, Lavia's back. Now, a lot of Enzo's points have been without Lavia in the team, and his data recently has been good without Lavia in the team. But if Lavia does start with Caicedo at right back and inverts, it does push Enzo into a more advanced position. That's not the be-all and end-all. We don't need Lavia to come back for him to be a good asset. But I'm saying, I think with the fixtures coming up, again, 3 of the next 4 are at home. The away games against Man City, they're actually pretty okay fixtures. I'm really okay owning Enzo. He's just like a solid, fine option to have. And in future weeks, if I do want to go out there and try and get an Mbeumo, which is going to be difficult for money, or a Gordon, or move him to a Murphy or someone like that, then I can do so. But I don't feel like I need to do that right now, especially when I can just sit him on the bench this week. So that's how I feel about the midfield 5. Salah, Palmer, Fernandes, Rodgers, very happy. Enzo, less happy, but still fine owning. Let's move on to the 3 forwards and then do a bit of planning ahead. So moving on to the 3 forwards, and a bit of a common theme, I'm actually pretty happy with my 3 forwards. Now, I've used a lot of transfers recently. Like you can see, I've got 1 free transfer. to try and get to a position where I am happy with my 15 players and I don't feel like I need to use a transfer unless something crops up or unless I feel like there's a real luxury one that I'd like to make. But let's start with the easiest one, which is Alexander Isak. I say it's the easiest one. Apparently, according to Howe, he's carrying some sort of issue. It sounds like a hamstring issue. He obviously was never going to play in the FA Cup third round. They just didn't need him. I think they won the game 3-1. Gordon scored a penalty without Isak on the pitch as well. It felt like a good game to give him a rest anyway. But we do know that Isak has struggled with injuries in the past, especially muscular injuries. If he is a doubt or if there is any real issue, I can't see Howe risking him at any game. But we also know that Eddie Howe does like to flog his players. The quote from Eddie Howe that came out was way too positive. It's like Arteta. When Eddie Howe is really positive, it worries me. But he basically said that Isak almost could have been fit and available for the FA Cup game this weekend, and therefore there's a good chance of him being available for the Premier League. So if we take Howe at his word, and maybe we shouldn't do that, I reckon Isak's fine. I reckon he probably was going to get a rest anyway. Maybe he did come off with a bit of a precautionary thing, but it gave him enough time. I think when he came off in the EFL Cup game against Arsenal, it was 7 days until the Wolves game. So he's got a full week to rest, a full week to recover, to see the physios, to get what he needs done. Maybe he doesn't get 90 minutes if there is an issue. But unless we get a definitive update, or unless we find out with a leak or there are training pictures that suggest that Isak isn't going to be available, then I'm just going to keep and start him. And I still think he's a good captaincy shout. It does put me off slightly if there are any doubts around whether he is going to be fit enough to start or fit enough to play 90 minutes. I feel like even if we got confirmation that Isak was out for this week, I'd be very, very tempted to keep him because I could just play Enzo against Bournemouth at home or Robinson in a 4 at the back, like a 4-4-2. So I think in most situations, Isak's fine. I don't want to scaremonger or fearmonger. I'm sure there is a very good chance he's available, but I just wanted to raise the fact that FPL haven't actually flagged him. There is a small chance that he doesn't play in Game Week 21. Let's then move on to Mateta, who I'm actually okay with the fact that no one seems to want to buy Mateta. And I think the reason is he's at a very tricky price point, right? 7.2 million isn't easy. He's more expensive than Wood, a lot more expensive than João Pedro, who of course might be injured himself, Raul Jimenez, etc. And then he's a little bit or quite a bit less than the likes of Jackson and Isak. So it feels like if you've got the money, you go up to Isak and maybe Jackson, maybe even Solanke, who's slightly more. And then if you obviously don't have the money, then go for a cheaper asset, or you want to save money, you go for like a Wood or a Raul Jimenez. So I can understand why people aren't interested, but for me, from my perspective, it looks very likely that it will start most games in the Premier League. He gets good minutes when he does start. We think he's first choice penalty taker. His data's okay. And we know he's got a very high ceiling. And what I like about Mateta, and some people will hate this, Mateta's the opposite of Chris Wood. Mateta's a very streaky player. Like, Chris Wood is just super consistent. Across like 2 seasons now, he's been very consistent. Mateta will just go on these random runs. I think he scored 3 goals in the first 22 games last season, and he got like 13 from there on in. We saw in game week 34 last season, it was a double, but he got 29 points. Mateta is a player that can go absolutely nuclear in a given game. He's a big chance magnet as well when Crystal Palace are starting to attack well. And I've just seen signs recently, Sarr, Eze, Mateta, even Kamada when he comes on, Munoz, Mitchell. The team's just starting to play a little bit better. It's taken a while. Since Elise left, they've struggled a little bit, but I'm starting to see a lot more of what I like from Crystal Palace. So I think Mateta's just a really decent player to own. And I think with those fixtures coming up, even if Crystal Palace aren't at it, even if Mateta doesn't have the best minutes, you'd expect a couple of returns in the next 5 games as a bare minimum. So I'm just very happy to have Mateta in the team. And Leicester away this week is a really nice fixture to have him for. So yeah, Isak, Mateta, really good. And Chris Wood, in terms of players I'm happy owning, I'm delighted to have Chris Wood. He's got Southampton at home next week. The fixtures after that do turn for the worse. I do feel like, I wouldn't say you've missed the entry point for Chris Wood, because the entry point is probably game week 22, but I could imagine after the Southampton game with the slightly trickier fixtures, his returns could dry up a little bit. And I think he could start to leave people a little bit frustrated. But so far this season, there's been no signs of him slowing down. The returns have been brilliant. I brought him in last week, not really expecting that much, really. It was more just because I didn't like any of the other forwards. And he immediately goes and gets me an attacking return. I love the man. All of a sudden. I was a Chris Wood hater, now I'm a Chris Wood lover. I think the big thing around him this week is he's got Liverpool at home. Do I start him or do I start one of Enzo or Robinson? Chris Wood is obviously a better asset than both Enzo and Robinson. In a normal week, you'd expect more points, but Liverpool are still one of the better defences in the league, but they've just started to concede more chances recently. Their underlying data's actually not dropped off that much, but they're just finding a way to concede goals. And it is Nottingham Forest. Like, they're playing incredibly well this season. If they are to score, you'd probably expect it to be Chris Wood. And he's on penalties as well. Enzo's not on penalties. Obviously, Robinson's a defender. I'd love to know down below, is there any world in which I can justify starting Enzo or Robinson ahead of Wood? Or do you think I've got my current benching decision correct? So if we look at the team overall, really, I don't think there's many places where I desperately need a transfer in the upcoming game weeks. And I'm going to discuss that in the next section when we plan ahead and look at future game weeks. The only two players that I think desperately need, not even desperately, but slightly need changing is probably Vandenberg in an ideal world would be a slightly better like Castagna or Howson. And then Enzo might be an Ahmad Assar or a Jacob Murphy. But otherwise, it's looking pretty decent. So yeah, as you can tell by the way I'm talking, the plan at the moment is to roll the free transfer. If any of my attackers get injured, I'll play Enzo. If any of my defenders get injured, I'll play Robinson. So I don't think there's much news over the next couple of days that could change my opinion on that. But if you see a transfer that you think is worth making, of course, let me know. I could do Enzo to Ahmad, Enzo to Sarr, or Enzo to Murphy, and then bench Chris Wood against Liverpool. That's a pretty attacking thing to do. But as we discussed in the first section, I want free transfers coming up. So that's the team. Let's now discuss sort of future weeks and how I can foresee my team developing over the coming game weeks. So guys, just jumped over to Fantasy Football Hub to plan ahead and show you how my team looks for the coming game weeks and see what they sort of recommend as well. And if you do want to get 30% off of Fantasy Football Hub, and I think they're still offering up until the 21 deadline, that 30-day free trial. Click the link down below. It allows you to plan ahead. They have all sorts of stuff like Opta Statistics, which is useful if you want to sort of track the data of players. They've got Fixture Analyzer to track who has the best fixtures coming up. I mean, they've got points projections for all of the players. They've got player comparisons if you want to compare two players. They've got price changes as well, really useful. Player profiles as well for each player. The Match Center on game day, which is super useful. I'm not going to go on and on and on, but if you do want to check it out, I would highly recommend it. But what I thought I would use this for is just to show you why I think it is conceivable, if I don't have loads of issues, to potentially keep rolling the transfer in the coming game weeks, as boring as that obviously does sound. So this week, no transfer required. They actually recommend... Oh no, Enzo's gone ahead on predicted points. Okay, sorry, Rogers has gone ahead. So they recommend benching Enzo, as is the plan. So that is game week 21. If we then go ahead to game week 22... the team's actually looking arguably even better than it does in game week 21. So you can see a 97% game week rating. The only major decision will just be, do I start Munoz or Robinson, assuming that both are available? Or do I start both and actually like bench Enzo? This is something that I do need to consider more because Robinson and Munoz are great. So I could even play like a 4-3-3 or something like that. But I think I'll usually probably back. They recommend benching Robinson and starting Munoz. I'll have that decision to make. I could have, of course, played Fabianski against Crystal Palace if I wanted to. Then going into game... So I did this so badly last week. So going into game week 22, I'd have 2 free transfers. Then going into game week 23, I'd have the 3 free transfers. Again, I don't feel like I need to make a transfer. Enzo's got Man City, who at the moment don't look particularly good anyway. But that could be obviously a game that I want to bench him for. But Rogers has West Ham. The front three all have good fixtures. Munoz has Brentford when Robinson's got Man United. I think I probably slightly prefer to play Munoz there. Obviously, Sanchez isn't great this week, but your goalkeeper never has a good fixture every single week. So game week 23, again, looks like a pretty decent game week. Game week 24, Fantasy Football Hub have this as a possible projected double for Liverpool. I don't think it will be. So we'll go on the basis that it's Bournemouth away in game week 24 and not the double. But regardless, you're happy with your Liverpool assets. Gabriel's got Man City, but it's Gabriel, so you start him every game. Munoz has Man United and Robinson's got Newcastle. This is the first week where they don't rotate particularly well. Like Munoz and Robinson here, they don't rotate great. But if you had to start Munoz against Man United, it's not the end of the world. He's basically an attacker anyway. The rest of the players have good fixtures. Like my front three, as always. Rogers has Wolves away. Enzo's got West Ham at home. I could even start Enzo if I wanted to. If Lavia is back and let's say Enzo's playing like super attacking, then that's a possibility. But I shouldn't need to make... I'm not saying that I won't, but I shouldn't need to make a transfer in 24. And then going into 25, let's say that we do expect this to be the week that Liverpool double. The rest of the team have great fixtures. Front three is fine against Isak. I know Man City away doesn't look that great, but Man City aren't that bad. For a fixture, I should say. Munoz has Everton. And then on the bench, I've even got Enzo against Brighton. I've got Robinson against Nottingham Forest at home. These are fine fixtures too. If I've done my maths correct, if I just could roll everywhere, I'd have 5 free transfers going into 25. Things will crop up, of course. It might be that at this point, I decide to own a third Liverpool asset or activate the assistant manager chip. Or maybe this is when I decide, do you know what? Bruno's not doing it for me. I'll downgrade Bruno to Mbermo, just as an example. I probably won't do this because I think Bruno will be fine. And I can actually upgrade Enzo for anyone up to 7 million. So at that point, I don't even know who will be the bandwagon at that point. It'll be so far in the future. But maybe at that point, I decide, do you know what? I'm going to upgrade Enzo, downgrade Bruno, and make the squad a little bit stronger overall. But basically, I should, unless things crop up that we don't expect, be able to just roll over the coming game weeks. And I promise the content won't be boring as a result, and things will probably happen. Let me know what you think of my plan. Make sure to check out Fantasy Football Hub. Should we see what their AI transfer recommendation is? This may take up to 20 seconds. Doesn't usually take up to 20 seconds. Oh no, they recommend selling Enzo for Sarr. It's not what we want to see. I recommend rolling, so I'm not going to do it. But if I were to make a transfer, it would be Enzo to Sarr, Enzo to Ahmed, or Enzo to Murphy. So it's something to consider. Let me know if you would do it. I'm going to leave it there. And yeah, make sure to check out Fantasy Football Hub if you want to get your own AI recommended transfers. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 21 team selection. Apologies that there hasn't been much content this week. I have recorded an FPL therapy episode, but I've basically just had a little bit of time off, which has been very much needed. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, which will be the deadline decisions video and a deadline stream tomorrow. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.